Well, thank you all for skipping the AI session. I apologize.
And you contribute with AI.
Sorry,
Please
I said
save heckling to the end.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry I said anything. Anyway, thank you for coming to our session.
First time contributor work? No. You have to disclose it at least.
Thank you for coming to our session, which is called From Them to Us, Demystifying Drupal Contribution. I will say also, because it's a smallish group, we don't really want to be super formal, and if there's like a conversational thing we can do, that's totally fine. So, I mean, I'll just quickly sort of go through a bit of an outline. We'll talk a little bit about each of our journeys to find Drupal initially, and then how we got involved in contribution. We'll talk a little bit about who is involved in Drupal in general, who makes it, and then we'll give you some tips about how to start your journey or progress your journey if you've already started. And then if you have some questions, we will answer them. I am Pamela. I am currently the product owner for Drupal CMS. I'm also the CTO of Technocrat, and sort of kind of on the side also still the core committer team facilitator, but at the moment I don't have tons of time for that. I've been contributing to Drupal, or working with Drupal since 2011 and contributing for almost as long as that. But we wanted to talk a little bit about how we got there. So where I started, I think, as you might imagine, I studied history and classical civilizations, and I wrote a thesis about Italian colonialism in Africa and the origins of World War I. When I graduated uni, I had sort of an interest in journalism, but I completely avoided anything to do with science or math or anything like that because I just thought I have no interest in that whatsoever. So I had an interest in journalism, so my first job out of college was as a copy editor at a newspaper. So in addition to proofreading, we would actually do all the page layouts, and we used a program called Adobe PageMaker, which I think then became Adobe InDesign, but it wasn't the best hours because newspapers generally go to press at that time. At my paper anyway, it was about 1 a.m. So I was working from 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. because you had to check the first papers when they came off the press to make sure there were no typos. So I didn't love that job that much. And then I started working at a website. I was a writer, so I was covering sports for NBC Sports initially, and then I moved to NBCOlympics.com. I went to Beijing in 2008 to cover swimming, and then I went to Vancouver in 2010 to cover ice hockey. And although now Drupal is quite widely used at NBC, at the time it was not. And the first CMS that we used there was a proprietary one that no longer exists, thankfully. But in the year 2006, it did not have a WYSIWYG editor of any kind. So we had to write all of our HTML manually. And we used a product called HomeSite. I don't know if anybody recognizes that lovely red logo. But we had to use HomeSite to create all of our pages, including layouts. So everything was tables, just tables, tables, tables. And for whatever reason, I found that sort of like more interesting than writing about the sports stuff. So I was like the table person. Anytime anybody needed a really complicated table, they would come and ask me. And then, I mean, I guess that in a way that was lucky because I really was interested in it. So at that time, about sort of 2010, 2011, it turned out to be a really good time to leave journalism and move into tech. So after I left that job, I got a little bit more involved. Like I got more interested in web stuff. I took some online courses. I learned a little bit about like PHP, and I built some static PHP, you know, like with include files and stuff like that. And then I found WordPress, and then I found Drupal, and I completely fell in love with it because having been subjected to so many CMSs at the time that were these proprietary horror shows where you would ask them to make like one small change and they'd say, nope, sorry. It's like, can we just have this box checked by default? When we make, nope, sorry, that's not possible. And it's like, oh my God, I found Drupal and I just could not believe how powerful it was. So then I moved to Australia in 2011, which I do not regret. I started attending the local Sydney meetups, and I got connected with some local agencies. Then I attended a conference, which at the time was called Drupal Down Under. Now it's called Drupal South. But I attended Drupal Down Under in 2012. I met this random guy from Belgium. We went to the Australian Open. And then after that, I got a job at Previous Next with Owen, who's sitting here, and Kim, who's also in that picture.
And Mac Stang.
Sorry? And Max. You don't need to know about him. And then at Previous Next, they were very encouraging of contribution. So I attended DrupalCon Sydney, and I actually gave my first ever presentation. It was my first time public speaking, and I was completely terrified. I still don't really love it, but I was totally hooked. It was so much fun. There were a bunch of the top contributors that came. We had an awesome time at the sprint. I learned so much, and I really think it was kind of like, it was a really nice introduction into the community. And then my first core patch came not too long after that, I think in maybe June of 2013. And it was this really weird visual regression in, I think it had something to do with the overlay still maybe. And I found it while I was testing something else, and I made the issue, and I just thought, oh, you know, bravo, I found a core bug. And I thought that would be the end of it. But then shortly after, Mike Gifford commented and said, yeah, you're right. Do you want to fix it? And I was like, oh. Hadn't really thought about that. Like I kind of thought, no, I can't fix it. I showed you, but I can't fix it. But I mean, I knew how to write CSS, so I thought, why not give it a try? I'd never created a patch before. Lee, who I was working with at the time, I'm sure helped me very much in even figuring out how to do that. So I thought, yeah, sure, I'll write some CSS, no problem. And then, of course, core being core, that was not the end of that. There was left to right. There was all this other stuff that I had no idea about. So I think I maybe wrote there were maybe 4 patches before we actually got it right. And then Angie committed it with this message, which I just was, super excited by, because I had met her in Sydney, and she was such an amazing contributor at the time. So this felt really it was super meaningful to me, I think, because it felt like a little bit of a transition point where I was kind of like, I felt like I was part of the team. And my contribution path in general has been very long and winding. So started at local meetups, conferences, attending, speaking, organizing. Work was always encouraging. I would randomly maybe do some patches or do some issue triage. I got involved in Bug Smash. I put my hand up to be the core committer facilitator in 2019 and kind of got involved with that team. And then from there, that led to being involved in the initial conversations about Drupal CMS. And when the question was asked if anybody wanted to participate, I said I would absolutely love to be involved if I can. And that has led to today where my current employer, Technocrat, has agreed to sponsor me about 50%. Sometimes it might be a little more than 50% working on Starshot, don't tell. But yes, thank you for that. And yeah, so between Previous Next, which was the first company I worked for in Australia, and Technocrat, I've always found a lot of support from my companies. So that's been a huge benefit as well. I mean, I think we all struggle to find time in life to contribute, and doing it sort of just for free in your own time is just not really a realistic expectation. So we'll talk a little bit later about if you don't have a company that encourages it, how maybe you can try to help change that. So now I will hand over to Lee, who will.
Does this work?
Yeah. Does it work?
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Lee Rowlands. The way to pronounce my name is L.A. Rowland, not larowlan. And I'm the core framework manager. I'm going to come over here because I need the speaker. Yeah, I've got the speaker notes over here. That's why I need to stand over here.
There's no notes.
Whatever.
Just kidding.
Yeah, so we're, but before that, I wonder what's coming up. So where I started, I've got a degree in engineering and a degree in science. And my science degree is in mathematics. And so my first job out of uni was a statistical analyst. I live in regional Queensland. This is the beach out front, me and my dog. It's not uncommon for me to get annoyed if there's anyone else at the beach, because that's how kind of remote it is. But my entry into web is a bit of a long and winding process. I always had an interest in programming. I took a few electives in uni in C and HTML. And yeah, as I said, my first job related to my degree was as an analyst for a university, and we were sending out reports in Excel that we provided to distribute. And I thought, well, instead of emailing these, we can put them on the intranet. And I was also in charge of the planning process, working out how many offers we had to offer to students, which again involved sending out a spreadsheet, and that would go around to all the faculties, and then they'd make the changes and email them back to me, and then I'd collate them. And because one faculty would change the other faculty, then I'd email it again. And this is the kind of file names that we ended up with at the end. And I sort of thought, well, we could build this as a web app. And the IT department said, oh, we don't have any capacity for that for the next 12 months, but here's a directory and here's a Oracle database, and you can put PHP files in there and do what you like. So I spent 3 months building a budgeting system for the uni, and I learned a lot in the process, and the pilot year we got within 1.5% of the budget, so I thought it was a success, and we never saw these spreadsheets again.
But it says
Yeah, you know. It was more like I want to say 2005.
V23 though, by the way.
Yeah, so not long after that, I took some time to travel and I ended up moving interstate and I kept tinkering with PHP and MySQL as a home dad while my kids were at school. I was sort of staying home looking after them. And from there, I got a job at a local council where I met a guy named Nick Shue, and he would have been about 18 at the time. And I started my own business doing web stuff, and my first client wanted an e-commerce site. And so I Googled open source e-commerce and found Ubercart. And I had some exposure to Drupal and I recognized Drupal, and that was kind of, I got a lot of work from there writing custom modules for people all around the world, and I ended up quitting my day job to focus on that full time. My contribution path, I started out volunteering to maintain Ubercart Hotel, and this is an old message from me, but I actually have an Ubercart before I had a Drupal account. So I generally started with Ubercart. But my path was a contrib developer, then I became a core contributor, then I became a core maintainer, then I became a core committer. And that's a bit of a whirlwind path. The way I kind of started, this is in 2009. I was talking with someone on the Ubercart forums, because Ubercart had forums as well. And I said, I'm happy to finish off this hotel booking module that you'd written. This was the guy named Will. He approved it. And it's a long time ago, but that's actually how I got write access to CVS. And I know for anyone who's trying to get commit access nowadays, it's a much harder process. From there, my first core patch, as you know, we have a templating system in Drupal, and the file names that you create for your twig files can include the URL. So page -- node would serve anything underneath the node, but that didn't work if your URL had a hyphen in it. And so I worked on this, and as with Pam, that was committed by Angie for me. And at that point, I was just kind of lurking around core, and there was this blog post that went out from a Drupal contributor named Sun, and it was basically a call for help. And I'd been making a living off Drupal, so I kind of showed up in IRC and said, yeah, I'll help out. What module do you want me to take on? And this is a blog post from CHX, and he said, yesterday I saw a guy on IRC who was contemplating taking on Fora module. That was me. So I posted an issue, and again, Angie committed that. And so in 2011, I became a core maintainer. And at this point, I didn't really have a lot of core experience other than I was there and willing to help. And from there, I got involved in a lot of Drupal 8 initiatives, and I learned a lot along the way. And I happily writing and reviewing patches for Drupal 8 for, I think it was another 4 or 5 years from there by the time we got it finished. And at one point, I started an initiative called Patch a Day. And I said, I will work on one patch every day until Drupal 8 is a stable release, thinking it wouldn't take very long. And it was 2 years. Yeah, and then at one point I was asked to become a core committer. And so in 2017, I came on as a provisional committer. And yeah, then I was appointed to formally as a core framework manager. And apparently now I maintain 73 contrib modules as well. So yeah, I'll hand you back to you, Pam.
Not too shabby. So there were 2 reasons that we initially, when we were chatting about proposing a session, that we wanted to do this. And the first one is just to generally talk about the process of becoming a core contributor, or what the different kinds of contribution are. I think something to highlight about both Lee and my path is that for the most part, the positions that we got were things we volunteered for. So Lee just said, yeah, you guys need help. I think I can help. And then he became the forum system maintainer. I have volunteered for a number of things, whether it's conference organizing or whatever. I've been a sprint mentor. I also just put my hand up to be the core committer facilitator, and that's all it took. So a lot of times, if you're waiting around to be asked, you probably won't have quite as much luck as if you just kind of start doing stuff and putting your hand up and volunteering. But the other reason that we wanted to do it is that I think we've all probably seen, and maybe even contributed in some way to, the conversation about Drupal is sort of like there's this them idea of like, well, they're doing it one way and that's not how I would do it. And of course it's broken because it's Drupal, or of course the documentation sucks, it's Drupal. It's Drupal, that's not going to happen. And I think we heard, there was probably, after the initial announcement of Starshot, there was probably like 99% enthusiasm and excitement. And then you still heard that sort of 1% of like, yeah, right, this isn't going to happen. And it is happening. So yeah, I think that it's something that it's really important to kind of call out, that there is no them. It's all just us, because even if you think about someone like Lee, who's been in this position for a really long time, or Jess, who's here, or Gabor, who's here, or Christina, all of these people who are, the leadership, we were all just people at one point that had an interest and had the motivation and
We're still
kind of.
just people.
Sorry?
We're still just people.
That's what I mean. We are. We're still just people, and we all started somewhere. And so we just wanted to maybe try to reframe a little bit the way people think about this and the way people talk about it. Because at the end of the day, Drupal is just the output of a bunch of people. And a lot of those people are volunteering their time. So when you are making comments, or when you're frustrated with something, it's good to remember that this is just something that a bunch of people are working on and generally doing their best. I mean, people aren't doing things purposely to frustrate you, but yeah, and there's a QR code here that links to a blog post written by our very own XJM that's called That Thing You're Complaining About, Someone Worked Really Hard on It. So yes, keep that in mind. And then I'll just talk a little bit about which people contribute to Drupal, which people build Drupal. So there are kind of, I guess, categories. There's contributors. That's pretty much anybody that's doing anything to help. That could be on the issue queue. It could be organizing conferences. It could be any number of things. But basically, if you have a Drupal.org account and you've ever posted something, I guess in a way you're a contributor. There's no gate to becoming a contributor. Anyone can make an account. Anyone can create an issue. Anyone can comment on an issue. So you can start by reviewing the issue queue. I mean, I think Lee mentioned that for a while he was kind of lurking. He was watching what was happening until he felt comfortable. But basically, anybody can be a contributor. And then there are also subsystem maintainers. There are about 100 of those people who oversee our particular part of core, whether it's a module or a theme or just a subset of things. They're usually people who have already been working on it and might know something about it beforehand, or they could be people like Lee who just said, I want to help, and I'm sure I can figure this out somehow. A lot of times it is just people that say, fine, I'll do it. And also, it is worth noting, there are a number of subsystems that do not have maintainers. So if this is something you're interested in, please come find us. And then there's also the leadership team / the core committer team, which is about 20 people that have, most of whom have access to write to the Drupal code base. So they're the ones that do the final reviews. And they are the kind of gatekeepers of core and doing the actual commits. A lot of them are paid for at least part of what they do, but also a lot of them are volunteering their time, because even the people who have paid, a paid portion of their work from their job, I have no doubt are doing stuff out of hours, because there's just too much to do. And I think it's really important to say that without the investments of these companies, so whether it's Previous Next or Acquia or Lullabot, Drupal core just really wouldn't be what it is today. I don't want to be too stark about it, but it would be very bad if we lost the investment from those companies. And these are just some statistics about the numbers of contributors. So since 2022, this is from GitLog, so it doesn't include meetings and things like that, but about 2,600 different contributors. Maybe sounds like a lot, but when you think about how many millions of people are using Drupal, it feels like we could probably do better than that. And then even from that small number, the number of people that worked on more than 20 issues is only 5%, and then even lower than that for more than 50 issues, it's only 2%, which is really kind of amazing if you think about the small number of people that are shouldering most of the responsibility for this. And just to call out, I think, a little bit about what one person can do, the Bug Smash initiative, which was proposed by Lee, although Tim Plunkett claims maybe he thought of it for views, but Lee denies that. Anyway, it happened. And these are the statistics. But I mean, I think it's kind of incredible when you think about it. It was an idea Lee had that he was frustrated by the number of core patches that he was having to reroll all the time. And so just kind of got a group of people together to try to reduce the number of bugs. And I won't read.
Got it to work.
Yeah, that's true. Lee got it to work. Lee motivated a large group of people. It was potentially coincidentally timed with COVID, where some of us had nothing else to do for a really long time. So, I mean, you know, almost 4,500 issues have been closed, and over 1,000 issues have actually been fixed by people in some way from the Bug Smash initiative. We've also got a Slack channel with 684 people as of right now, but maybe we can get that up to, if all of you join, we could get that up to like 695. And then the needs review queue initiative is another thing that just one person kind of came up with, and his frustration with Core was that there were tons of issues that were sitting in needs review that either like would have failed tests, and it was basically just really hard to figure out what actually needed action. So he wrote a bot along with Theo. He wrote a bot that brought that the number of like issues currently marked needs review. It was around 2,700 when he started, and as of 5 minutes ago, there were 162. So it's really, really helpful because it gives people who are looking to do reviews the kind of confidence that this is the actual like live working issues, and you know where to spend your time. And similarly, the number of things that this has affected is amazing. I mean, almost 3,000 issues worked on and 1,300 issues fixed with that tag.
And one thing that doesn't mention in the statistics here is the average time to a review. At the point now, if there's something that hasn't been reviewed in over a month, you know, Stephen escalates it up to the system maintainers and then up to the framework managers. And so if you've worked on a patch before and it just feels like crickets, it's given people, it makes it feel much more responsive for contributors.
It's something we've been trying to solve for, like, since I started in Core. That, like, when I started working on Core, it was my goal to fix that, and I failed. I mean, getting a point to have views and then Drupal 8 Core kind of diverted me from that, and he fixed it.
Yeah, but I mean, it is genuinely true that it was just like if one person kind of gets to be in their bonnet about it, they can actually do something. Genuinely, you can do a lot if you really want to.
Yeah, I mean,
you have the right alignment of like privilege and time,
yeah,
and the right people supporting and helping you.
Yeah.
It works.
On the previous slide where we had the statistics about the number of issues fixed, in that 2 years, Stephen's been credited on over 700 issues, which is, no, 1,400 issues, which is 2 issues a day for 2 years. So yeah, it's an amazing output from one person.
And then
Is doubled your goal of 1 issue a day?
Yeah, he has doubled my goal.
So we'll just highlight a couple of other people who contribute to Drupal in various different ways. And one of the people we want to highlight here is Emma. She first started using Drupal as a content designer at the University of Edinburgh. So she didn't have any Drupal experience, but she came in and she was trying to help out the content team, and she was asking them about the content design, and she had some questions. Then she went to the developers, and I think she found that they weren't quite as forthcoming as she wanted them to be, but she thought, well, this is open source, so maybe I can just figure this out myself. So she started, she signed up for Drupal.org, she started getting involved, she started trying to help, because I think maybe, I guess it was like, well, if my developers won't do it, maybe I can get the community to do it. So she really just saw opportunities. She joined the Promote Drupal committee as a member. She started working on what's called the Drupalisms initiative, which is like a de-jargoning Drupal. It's kind of an effort to make the Drupal core language a little bit more accessible, less Drupal specific, and less kind of like having our own language, and kind of making Drupal core terminology a little bit easier to understand. And as a result of all of that work that she was doing, we invited her to be on the Drupal CMS UX steering committee, and she's been helping out massively, working on user flows and wireframes and user research and testing. So I think this is a really cool story because, you know, she's not a technical person. She's only been a member of Drupal.org for a little over 2 years, but she's still managed to get involved in all of these things, again, just by putting her hand up and being helpful, basically. So
yeah. So we've got a couple more profiles we'd like to highlight. We really could do a whole session just about this. But this is more to illustrate that Drupal is built by people, and so sharing some of their stories, adds that level of humanity to it. So this is Len. He's a developer at Amsterdam, and his introduction to Drupal was at a 2-man company. They were evaluating CMSs, and they compared all the different open source ones. And Drupal, the code was clean and well documented, and he did ask me to say by comparison. So that drew them in, and once they started working, Drupal continued to surprise them. His first contribution was at DrupalCon Amsterdam, and a friend dragged him into the contrib room and made him work on a core issue. And he was just gripped by the amount of things he could learn from that contribution experience and having his work reviewed by people that knew much more than he did at the time. And from there, he's gone on to be the maintainer of reviews in core and looks after our automated testing. And he also is a key member of the Bug Smash initiative.
Not just a coincidence that he's the views maintainer.
No.
And he's also highly involved in bugs.
Yeah, and another example is Greg. So we're trying to highlight here that there are different roles in the community. So Emma's involved in UX, Len's involved in a core module. Greg is involved in the security team. He is a developer with the State of Colorado Behavioral Health, and the asterisk is he's also available for consulting. But he'd been building web applications for telephone companies like ATT and Bell Canada. And he was learning about open source and Linux on the side, and about the time he was thinking he needed to make some reusable login features, and he realized, well, open source has probably already solved that. He found Drupal, used it for a few projects, and he loved the folks that he met. He decided to find a company, Growing Venture Solutions, for those that have been around long enough, and specializing in Drupal. And his work now, most of the time, the security releases that come out every week on I'm going to say Thursday, but for people in the Western Hemisphere, it's on a Wednesday. He does things like coordinating the release, working with the maintainers, publishing the security releases, and triaging the new things as they come in. And so perhaps we could have a slide up here about you. You started using Drupal you attended this presentation or watched it later, and you became a future major contributor. And if anyone came to the session, we had a panel yesterday about the credit system and the perceived credit gaming, and you never know who the next major contributor is. Hopefully someone in this room. And so I think all that highlights that Drupal is built by us. So let's talk about how to get started, and if you already contribute, how to increase that. It's a pretty small room here, but I know a lot of people already do contribute, so
Millions of people will be watching.
Millions, yes.
yeah. So contribution starts with an issue. These are the two links. Greg helpfully had these in the first time contributor workshop, which was earlier today. So the next time you think about something that's annoying, or why doesn't this feature exist, maybe think about how you can help. Is there already an issue? If there is, follow it and add your thoughts. If there's not, create one. And sometimes even just creating an issue, it's the action that does receive a contribution credit, because it is important that someone took the time to document what the issue is and how to fix it. And if you're not sure, you can always ask in Slack. And as Pam said before, I spent a lot of time lurking in IRC and in issues and following along, and just so happened to see an issue that I knew the answer to at one point, and that's when I chimed in. Most of the issue queue discourse is very civil. There's little risk of drama as long as you're being polite and you follow the processes. And I think knowing who to ask is half the issue, but now you both know now you all know you can ask us, and there's a lot of other people in the room who can also help. I think this is still me.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So in terms of getting started, I think the first thing to ask is, why do you want to contribute? I think if you've got that motivation, that'll keep you coming back. So maybe you want to learn, or maybe you want to improve your reputation and profile. Reputation in the community is a commodity. It's something you can use. You can earn karma, but you can equally spend karma. So if you have worked with people in an issue, you might find it much easier to talk to them on Slack and ask for some help in a particular issue that may not even be anything to do with contribution. And you can build up networks, you can build up friendships, you can make sure that Drupal remains relevant, and you can fix something that might really interest you. So that's why you would want to, but why should you? I've got a lot out of it. I learned a lot of things from contribution. I've been using PHP since the 90s, but I think I learned more during the Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 process by having my code reviewed by really smart people and also reviewing the code of really smart people. There's a lot of things that you can learn about through even just triage. You don't have to be coding. Pam gives an example that through the Bug Smash issue queue triage, she worked out how to do multilingual sites because you needed to follow some steps to reproduce. And We have the luxury in Australia that we don't do a lot of multilingual work, so that's a good exposure to that.
You'd also be shocked by how many views features there are that you never knew about.
Yeah. So some tips. First one is to get into a habit. For myself, I like to do something different every day. So maybe Monday I'll look at some issues that are RTBC. Tuesday I might do some reviews. So on through the week. Yeah, as I said before, I did that one patch a day thing, and I think just finding something that gets you into a habit. If your sole motivation is to get contribution credits, it really won't happen if you just expect it to happen automatically. But if you put in a little bit, lots of little bits will add up over time. There's a blog post from Jess from a while back about she could throw her laptop into a lake and still receive credits. And I think if we hark back to those statistics, one of the contributors that was like 20 commits over that 2-year period was the person who was one of my first mentors, but hasn't been involved in Drupal for at least 8 years and still received 10 credits a year from issues they worked on decades ago.
Don't know if that's a good thing or.
I think it's a. So the next thing I would point out is to ask and learn, and certainly check your ego at the door. So some people have concern around imposter syndrome, but this is me. This is 2023. I'm a core committer at this point, and I don't understand something that's happening in Postgres, and so I ask a question. And this is David, the maintainer of the database API, and he explains to me that problem. And so, if I had have been, I'm too proud to ask, I would not have learned that. So I think that's really important. And I also think as you become more experienced in the community, it's important for you to demonstrate this publicly because it helps other people overcome imposter syndrome. We're all human, and if you don't show people that, it's difficult, yeah. And yeah, if you're not sure or uncomfortable about anything, just either ask in the issue or ask in Slack, and there's people that are willing to help if you ask politely. My next tip is to find your niche. So we had Len before who had his niche in views, Emma's in UX. I think, find something you care about, or in my case, find something no one cared about. Find something that annoys you. So the bug smash on the needs review are 2 good examples of that. But I think one thing here is to try and work in an initiative or swim with the current, to use another bad water analogy. If you work with an initiative, you'll find that you get faster results because there's multiple people working on the same thing with you. You're not kind of suffering in silence. You're not working in isolation. And if you are working in isolation, you do lose a lot of the benefits that we talked about earlier, like networking and friendships and like a karma. This one is specifically for organizations, build a contribution culture. Owen gave a session about this yesterday. If you didn't catch that, watch the recording. But I think it's important if you are in a company to celebrate stuff internally. So if one of your colleagues gets something committed, make sure you sort of celebrate that and highlight it because it's a big deal. And I think if everyone in the team has that same mindset, it really does help things grow exponentially. If you can, and you're an agency owner, find time to fund it. It does add up as benefit in the long run, and your staff will get better in their day jobs because they will learn things through the projects. And you can start integrating it into your client bids and even encouraging your clients. And one of our clients has had their logo featured in the Dries note as a major contributor to Drupal on the back of sponsorship work and on the back of their development team working with us on contribution. And
and I mean, I think just the last thing to say in the organizational side of things is if you don't have a team of people that feel comfortable, or you don't have time, whatever the limitations are in your organization, there's always the opportunity to pay someone else. There aren't any formal mechanisms for this. You can't just sort of go to Drupal.org and enter your credit card details and hit buy feature. But if you reach out to somebody that is potentially the right person and you offer to pay them money, they tend to receive that positively. So a while back when I was at Previous Next, there was a web form feature that we really wanted that wasn't available yet in Drupal 8. And although we had a number of very capable Drupal developers, they all said, it doesn't really make sense for us to build this. It's super complicated. We don't know the module as well as the maintainers. We reached out to one of the maintainers, and he said, yeah, sure. We paid him, whatever his standard hourly rate was. He added the feature to Drupal. He added the feature to web form. the feature was in the web form module from day one. We were using it without patches, and every other site that we built and every other site that was using web form also had access to that feature as a result. So I feel like this is maybe underrated or like underknown as an option, that it is open source, but you can definitely pay somebody to get what you need.
And that was certainly like what I built my business off, like just adding features to things. It was small, but it all added up. Yeah. And the last one is to join us. If you're looking for the push to get involved, we hope this session has helped, and at least you know our names now, and there's a lot of other people in the room that would be worth having a chat to in the corridor. We have the contribution day tomorrow. Hopefully you've already registered, and if so, we'll see you there. So it's at 9:30 till 5.
And if not, I think you can show up at 10 and maybe get a seat, apparently.
Yes.
Is that the line?
Yeah.
That's the official line.
The official line.
Show up.
The unofficial line is...
Show up. You may sit on the floor. But...
Yeah, so any questions? This is our Drupal.org usernames and Slack, if you have any questions.
If you don't have any questions, maybe you just want to share
Your story,
your contribution story, or if you have, anything at all. Or if you want to go to the AI session, you can do that.
Hi, my name's Owen. I've been a Drupalist for 17 years.
And?
My first step is admitting. Can I do a plug for my Drupal certified partner, Bob?
No.
4 o'clock today.
Sure.
There's a Drupal certified partner BOF at 4 o'clock today.
That we'll talk a lot about.
For partners, or for people, for anybody who's interested or has questions?
To talk about how contribution can contribute at a company.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also really important, because a lot of times I think companies consider it like a cost. It's like, well, we can't afford to have our team just working for free. But like, I think the education that you get is impossible. It's like impossible to quantify how valuable it is to be working on these things with the people that you're collaborating with. I mean, you're collaborating with some of the smartest people in the world on sometimes really complicated stuff.
Yeah.
And there's really no better way to learn it than to work on it with the people that know it better than you. So, yeah.
We have a mic. I'll go here first, if that's all right.
Hello. Hello. Great session. So I just wanted to share, I have a couple of questions also for that. So I started my journey in 2018 with Drupal. So I got introduced once I joined a company. I'm from India. So, but recently, 1 year back, so actually this year I got my first credit for contribution.
Congrats.
So it was, I was working with a company, so where they have a culture of promoting the contributions. So, because initially it was like learning Drupal and getting to know what Drupal is and serving what problem statement is in front of you as part of tickets and solve it for the customers and clients we serve. But open source contribution was not as part in initial years while I was working in that org. They were client centric, but yeah. So I found that the organizations which promotes in themselves to the employees or the people working with them, promoting the contribution makes more sense and enable more and more people to come. And now my adding up, I want to question is that I realized that I'm not that much into coding, but other than that, how can I contribute more to Drupal open source other than coding?
What sorts of things are you interested in?
I'm good with interacting with people. I'm good with documentation a little, which I feel I don't know. I need to get it validated.
Yeah.
But local meetups and these kind of things. I recently volunteered in Drupal Camp Pune, which was held this year, a couple of months back. So I'm getting to interact more and more, attending such conferences and camps, and looking forward for that. But maybe if I can get something on the Drupal.org to contribute to, I look forward for that.
Yeah, so Bug Smash is a really good example We're still active, but not as active. And now most of our contribution is driven around 2 daily tasks that we have in the channel that the bot posts in the day. One of those is to look at what we call a pony issue, which is postpone, maintainer needs more information. I don't know why we call it pony, but
I think we might consider that a Drupalism.
yeah.
But
So,
we'll talk about that
yeah,
later.
so basically there's, when someone reports an issue, if the maintainer can't reproduce it, they will set it to postpone, maintainer needs more information. And sometimes the person never ever responds to the question. And so what we try to do is revisit that list in order of longest time since someone's updated it, and try one more time to reproduce their bug or their issue, and that often involves going through the steps that they've listed. And if we can't, then we have a series of templates where we say, thank you, we couldn't reproduce this. We've asked you for more information. 3 months have passed. We're going to close this issue, but if you can reproduce it and find the steps, please reopen it and close that issue. And that makes a big difference. One every day ends up with thousands of issues, so there's that. And then we also have a daily task around, I've got to clear my brain, around an issue that needs triage.
There's a random triage.
Yeah, a random issue that needs to be triaged.
They're not being recorded.
Oh,
We have the lapel mics. Yeah.
that one. That's not on, sorry, this one. Yeah, so does that answer the question? Yeah.
I was going to say also that event organizing itself, if you enjoy attending events, taking the next step to help people organize those events is, if anyone who's done it knows that it can feel thankless and it's an enormous amount of work. I organized an event once, the very first Midwest Developer Summit, to try to bring together important stakeholders to get hard projects for Drupal 8 done, and it was exhausting. So that is, those events are listed on Drupal.org. It's a kind of contribution we recognize. That can be a really good way to help contributors in the local community connect, learn about Drupal, engage, find people that are interested in topics about Drupal, educate the community locally, and help connect people who might be interested in specific projects that are happening worldwide, connect from that local community to the global community and become involved in longer running initiatives and connect the initiative that might be interested in. So that in itself is actually a good opportunity for contribution as well.
Yeah, I think event organizing is a great way, especially if it's something you enjoy, because like Jess said, it's so much work. And it's also really rewarding, but these events are so critical. I mean, we often say, like, when we get together, we can have 3 conversations that unblock weeks of work that we just never would have had if we hadn't. And I think that, the events are really important, both because, someone has to organize them, but they're also great for networking. And a lot of the things that I've ended up doing throughout my core kind of journey have been the result of people I've met at events, conversations I've had at events, and all of that kind of thing. So I guess organize events, attend events, which it sounds like you've already been doing. But yeah, there really are so many ways to contribute that don't require coding.
And documentation is probably our biggest weakness at the moment. Not lack of, too much. Yeah. And so consolidating documentation is genuinely like one of our major priorities. And I know if you spoke, like we've spoken about it a lot over the last couple of days, but if you've done that before and you're good at it, we can help put you in touch with people that are trying to actively help with that. I think compared to some of the other younger frameworks out there, we're getting our butt kicked on that because we're just, it's not even a fire hose, it's more a tsunami of information that we're hitting people with.
Thank you. But it's important that we keep the Drupal 5 stuff.
I mean, yeah.
Drupal 5 is the future, apparently.
Someone might need to know at some point, so yeah.
I was going to add in terms of events, so we speak about Drupal a lot at Drupal events. We don't speak about Drupal outside of Drupal events enough.
Yeah.
And so if you have opportunities where you've got expertise that you can share to different open source communities or even other tech communities, there might be general web meetups in your area. There might be industry conferences that you can attend. Being able to tell the Drupal story, because a lot of people do think Drupal looks like Drupal 5 and they haven't seen Drupal CMS. And so being able to tell those stories is really important. The other thing is if you're part of one company and there's other companies in your area, then collaborate with those companies. So sure, you're going to compete with them on certain projects, but it's actually to all of your benefit if Drupal keeps winning and that other CMSs are not winning those projects. So there's many things that you can do collectively as companies that compete with each other around Drupal, but you all need Drupal to win in order to be successful as companies.
So I've been working in Drupal since 2010, but throughout all my career, I've been working with organizations that don't really promote, contribution and stuff. I mean, I've always been wondering what is the motivation of all these organizations of promoting contributions, and how can I pitch to them about
You need to watch Owen's. Yeah. Watch Owen's session. Yeah.
I mean,
I can briefly explain it.
Yeah.
if you'd like
No,
me to.
you.
So when you watch my talk, which is called How to Supercharge Your Business Using an Open Source Business Model, or something like that. So as a company that is based in relying on open source technology, number one, we need to be experts in that technology. How do we become experts in that technology? We do that through contribution. So if a new developer joins Previous Next, I know Eric was a relatively new developer when you joined Previous Next. How did you learn about Drupal the most? Lots of contribution. Yeah, and so us as a small company, sure, we've got some smart people. Lee's kind of smart.
I'm a days.
But by contributing, your staff are now being mentored by the best Drupal developers in the world. And that's not costing you money. It's saving you money by being trained by the best in the world. And so from a pure business perspective, our company has probably saved tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on training, because that's part of the contribution model. Yeah? And then the other part of it is, in order for us to attract good developers want to be involved in contribution if they're involved in open source. And so as a competitive advantage, us being able to promote ourselves as strong contributors means that good developers are attracted to working with a company like ours. And so that saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars in recruitment fees. I don't think we've recruited for a Drupal developer as long as I can remember. And so for the business owners, once they understand that they can actually save and make money by being contributors, then it changes the mindset completely. It's not a cost to their business, it's an investment.
I think also if you're talking about, if you're in a big organization and you feel like maybe, because I think there's also something to the fact that there are lots of really great Drupal developers in the world that aren't particularly interested in contributing. But if you are interested, you might try to find something small, like maybe an initiative or maybe a single issue or a feature or something like that. And if you take it to your manager or whoever and say, this is the thing. I mean, if you can tie it to a client project, that would be even better. But if you kind of start with one thing or maybe one or two things and you get them to buy in and you kind of even almost make it billable or in some way because it's for a client. And I feel like once you start small, they might see the potential. Like Owen's points are all correct, but it is also sort of a fundamental high-level business decision. And if you're talking about what can you do as a developer within the business, I would say try to pick something like, sort of like the find your niche thing. Pick something that maybe is a bug that a client site is struggling with or a feature that a client needs and see whether you can get them to support you in working on that, I guess, as a start, maybe.
I'll talk to you after too if you like. There's some other. I've got some specific examples that probably shouldn't be on the recording, but people that I've talked to, yeah.
So
I don't want to out them.
So I think this is public information, hopefully, that I'm going to share. I think Dries shared it before. Is that Acquia has an index of all the patches that are applied on customer sites. And so we have a leaderboard of patches. And so basically we can quantify like because the more patches the customers have applied, Lula has some data
So
on
do we.
that too.
There's a tag on Drupal.org issues
So-
PNX sprint.
Yeah.
It looks like it's the sprint, but it's actually the issues that are the most common in our client projects.
That's it.
Yep.
So the more patches that are applied, the more pain there is to support the customer because all the updates you need to keep the patches running, etc. So by basically going in and contributing to help those patches land, you save on customer support costs and update costs on the other side, and the customer is going to be happier. This will be easier to keep them up to date. So there's ways where you can quantify, like, this just makes more economical sense to just go and contribute these things than to keep it internal.
And one thing we didn't really talk about in the session, but writing about what you're doing in client projects is also a form of contribution. So if your organization has a blog, write what you're doing with things. Your maintainers, particularly if you've applied it beyond the Drupal planet, maintainers read those blog posts and learn about interesting things. Or someone will comment with advice on how to approach something differently, which might open a door for collaboration. It's really important to talk about what you're doing, like with the wider community. And these events obviously help that as well. Yeah.
Another strategy that you can use, and this won't necessarily work for everyone, it depends on the org, is if your organization already has a marketplace presence on Drupal.org, if they already have an org page, and if you already have like 20% project time or professional development time, free time of any kind at your company, just start working on issues in that time without really, talking to your manager about it if you're allowed to, and just start attributing the issues you work on to your organization. And eventually their marketplace ranking will start going up. I've talked to a couple very prominent contributors who just started doing this, and then all of a sudden these contributors happen to be very prolific contributors who got governance appointments, and then once their companies realized just how much of their business was coming from it, they said, okay, we're giving you dedicated money to do this role now. It won't necessarily work for everyone, but even in a small way, if you can say, hey, by the way, I've been doing this in my project time, look at how our marketplace rankings increased, we're on the second page now, or we're eligible for a gold tier certification, is that something we want to pursue? Then it can be something that's not like, where it's an upfront thing you're trying to push uphill, but you're saying, oh, I've just been doing this with this time that I already had for professional development, and it's had this positive impact. Are we interested in doing more? That way you're taking them a result you've already had. Yeah. You're showing them this is something that I've been doing. Are we interested in doing it more? And it's sort of like there's something they can already build on rather than this abstract thing that doesn't.
Yeah, and Owen's just said he's doing a BOF on the DCP, the Certified Partner Program at 4, so that might be something just to have the information to bring to them about what it actually means. Because one of the other things that they're doing, is, we had this recently where we had an RFP, and there was quite a lot of information about like sort of certifications and like proving your expertise, and we all know like Drupal doesn't really have that specifically. I mean, Acquia, whatever you call it, notwithstanding. But the Drupal Association will write you a letter that says, this organization is a certified partner, this is what they've done, and it's definitely, depending on the region that you're in, it can be a differentiator, because in Australia at the moment, when they first changed over, there were only, I think, 3 DCPs in all of Australia. Now there may be 5 or 6 or something, but sorry. But that actually can really make a difference if you're trying to sell your organization. If you have that and no one else has that, I actually do think that would make a difference. And the only way to get it is to contribute. There are many ways to get it, but the only way to get it is to contribute in some form. So that's also like just like kind of a purely selfish, self-interested business way of maybe getting it over the line.
Further to what Jess was saying, I know of a specific example, which was what I was alluding to before, where someone did get their company to the first page of the marketplace, then went into their annual salary negotiations and said, if I don't get dedicated time for this, I'm going back to every single issue that you've been credited on, I'm going to remove the attribution and you will fall off the marketplace.
And it worked. It worked.
Yeah, and the effort to do that would be like a day's worth of effort to
It would be
change your
worth it.
attribution.
It would be worth it.
Yeah. All right. We have to wrap up,
There's an
folks.
anecdote that I will not share in this room.
Yeah, we'll wait till the mics are off.